Doctor is shocked after seeing the smallest triplets ever this when woman gives birth. Frank hastily took Karen to the hospital since she felt like she was about to give birth. When Karen eventually gave birth, she had been in labor for 48 hours. But the doctor quickly became pale when he saw what she gave birth to. He was at a loss for words. Karen was informed that more tests needed to be performed in order to ensure the safety of the triplets once they were brought away. The doctor came back later. This can't be good, right? His whole face has become crimson, and he is unable to meet Karen or her husband Frank's eyes. No one has ever seen him acting this way before. What is happening? When he does begin to speak, he stutters. "I'm so sorry I had to start off with that." The doctor advised the parents to have more testing done. Karen's suppressed emotions finally overflowed. It was imperative that she see her infants, but the physician cautioned that it may be too risky for them to try. The questions needed to be answered. Karen pleaded to meet her 3 new babies. The physician was unmovable. He was so unwilling to share with them, he didn't even want to. Even Frank was beginning to feel some ire. As he stood up, he firmly informed the doctor that no one would prevent him from seeing his children. Frank made his way over to the hospital's research section on foot. While the doctor had not anticipated this, he immediately contacted security to ensure that Frank would be detained. Frank didn't put up a fight since he knew it would just make things worse. The medical staff ultimately helped him out the door. Karen, though, was obligated to remain. After that, Karen was taken into another chamber. Frank was sent home when she inquired about him. Karen was required to remain for further interrogation. In order to figure out what was going on with the triplets, they required additional information. As expected, Karen was bombarded with inquiries about her pregnancy, most of which she first avoided answering. She was thinking about nothing except her triplets. The nurse then emphasized to Karen how crucial it was for the infant's well-being that she respond. Until now, Karen had no clue how bad it really was. A question was posed to Karen, "Are you sure Frank is the father?" The news stunned Karen. Just how could they put such a demand on her? There's no doubt that Frank was the father. According to the nurse, Karen seemed to be trying to conceal something from them. Karen left out key details of the situation. Under stress, Karen began to weep. There was a lot going on before and during the pregnancy. The thought of telling anybody about it made her uncomfortable. Could it be that her own risky behavior has just placed her kids in danger? The nurse advised Karen not to disclose if that was her preference. The nurse, though, reassured Karen that she should not worry. They agreed to keep their conversations entirely private. Next, Karen began sharing stories from her childhood. Karen struggled so much to explain what she had done that she nearly lost her voice. Before she met Frank, she was living a very wild life. She was quite the party animal. As a result of Frank's efforts, she slowed down. Unfortunately, it may have been too late by then. By complete surprise, she found out she was pregnant. She suffered from severe, unexplained stomach pains throughout her pregnancy. However, the doctor repeatedly reassured her that everything was okay. According to Karen, this was completely typical throughout pregnancy. Do you think the doctor missed something? The nurse noticed anything unusual while looking at the results of tests previously performed by other physicians. Numerous omissions were made. It seemed as if they were making an attempt at secrecy. Something has to be done to uncover the truth. To this day, Karen has not really grasped the gravity of the situation. The doctor had been summoned by the nurse. Her inquiry focused on his latest lab findings. The doctor who oversaw the tests, however, was let go 2 weeks earlier. Did they link up somehow? The doctor kept telling Karen that everything was going to be well with the triplets. However, they needed to determine for themselves whether they could make it without someone looking out for them. For the hospital, the triplets were unquestionably exceptional. The doctor then informed Karen that she, herself, would need to spend the night in the hospital. Karen makes the conscious decision that she will no longer fight. She suspected that collaborating with the doctor would be beneficial for both her and the baby. Karen also had a secret plan for that night. So it's safe to assume that Karen did not spend the night locked up in her room. So she got out of bed to start searching for her children. They had to give in and let her hold the kid now. What was happening compelled her to investigate. She would come to deeply regret her decision. Karen has a general idea of where in the hospital the infants are being kept. Karen managed to get out of bed during the nurse's last visit. It was time to find out the truth. Karen quietly made her way to the upper level. Her body was flooded with adrenaline. Almost there, she thinks. Karen had to be wary as security patrolled the area. She had not evolved at all. That meant she couldn't claim to work for the medical center. Then she entered the nursery. One issue, though, was that the door was locked. Once inside, Karen discovered that she had been denied access because she did not have a key card. There was no other way for her to enter the building except here. She suspected she knew where to buy one, but caution was warranted. She couldn't have possibly escaped capture after giving birth, therefore that was out of the question. The key card could only be obtained from the security office. Karen suspected there could be extra keycards available. As a matter of fact, she was planning something. She would snag a wall whenever security patrolled the area. Inexplicably, she obtained the keycard. Taking care of her infants was a top priority. Karen rushes back to the nursery. She uses a quick swipe of the keycard to unlock the door. Then, a sigh of relief escaped her lips. A crack appeared in the door, and it gradually opened. She needed to locate them immediately. Since she had not seen her kid in some time, this was a trying time for her. Fortuitously, the devices have names on them. She walks in and immediately begins examining her surroundings. Unfortunately, she did not seem to have brought any of her infants with her. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spots a unique apparatus. That's probably it. She makes her way over to the window and gets down on her knees. Karen begins weeping when she sees her kids, and then, with a piercing cry, she lets go. If someone overhears her, it doesn't bother her in the least. She felt like her emotions were bursting out of her. Then she heard someone walking down the hall. Inside rushed the doctor and a number of nurses. Karen was on the ground outside the flat with her 3 children. As a result, they prepared for the worst. Karen was really taken aback when the nurses came and sat down next to her. This was why they were so adamant that Karen stay away from her kids until they had some answers. It was good news that the kids were still alive, but they were stuck trying to explain something to Karen for which they had no explanation. For the sake of Karen, please explain. She's curious as to the cause of her children's abnormal features. Her anger is further compounded when the doctor offers no solace. Doctor says test results will likely be available tomorrow and gives Karen a day's notice. Karen is not on board with this and creates a commotion as a result. The doctor recommends that Karen get some rest by retiring early. They go as far as saying they want to give her medication to help her sleep tonight. Karen is not interested in hearing it. She refuses to budge 1 inch. Putting Karen to bed against her will is the only choice the doctor has. She is also locked up for her own protection. Karen is so traumatized by what she saw that night that she cannot sleep at all. Her newborns did not seem healthy. For her and Frank, this may be the worst possible outcome. How she longed for the morning after. This would give the doctor some closure. At least that's what she assumed. On day 2, the doctor enters the room with a worried expression on his face. He requests that Karen get Frank here immediately. She must reassure the physician that she can remain calm, and Frank must do the same. Frank walks in and confronts Karen right away. "What have you done?" The physician requests that Frank remain silent and take a seat. The way he treated Karen was completely unjustified. He had no idea what was happening. Frank is eager to go, but he doubts the paternity of the infants. Karen tries to reassure him that she hasn't done anything wrong. Next, she insists that the doctor do a DNA test to determine whether or not Frank is the biological father of the triplets. That's the opinion of the doctor, too. The doctor requested a DNA sample from Frank. Even though Frank didn't understand, he consented. He was hoping for a reply. The doctor reasoned that, given Frank's DNA, he may be able to determine what was wrong with the infants. The doctor informed Frank and Karen that the results of the tests wouldn't be available for a few hours. Karen decided to wait apart from Frank's, who was still seething with pent-up rage. The doctor eventually returned. Karen had been invited to come back in by the doctor so that he could give her the DNA results, which he had brought in an unopened envelope. Even the doctor had some apprehension about what may happen. What options did Karen have if it came out that Frank wasn't the father? Her face went white as he opened the package. It was at this point when the doctor faced Frank. Frank became nervous about the doctor's prognosis and began to perspire. Carefully examined the lab findings. It turned out differently than he had expected. Frank, though, was worried since the doctor seemed to be in such shock. There was nothing very unusual, according to the doctor. Frank is the biological father, but no DNA from Karen could be found. Karen had a lot of questions. The physician was at a loss for words, but I assured them that they would discover the answer today. Karen urgently needs to visit her young kids. This time, the doctor said he'd accompany Frank and Karen to the delivery room. Frank is very perplexed upon first seeing his children. As opposed to Karen, he did not have a really strong response. Still, he had a lot of unanswered questions. The physician reassures the couple that they are working tirelessly to find solutions. Multiple physicians are putting in extra hours at the lab trying to find out why their children are getting such unusual DNA test results. In most cases, a skin test is not even considered by physicians. Baby skin is gently sampled without any discomfort to the child. The physicians anticipate this to take a few hours but believe it will provide a conclusive answer. Once again, Karen began acting out. She suddenly asserts that it's likely that their newborns have been switched, and she starts looking for her baby. Frank was certain that Karen had lost her mind. The doctor first intervenes in an effort to prevent Karen from reaching her conclusion, but ultimately gives in and allows her work through it on her own. Karen has not yet come out of her state of denial. She claims the child is not hers, thus she has no interest in keeping her. For a little while, Frank and the doctor let her vent her anger. Karen gives up and sits on the floor in defeat. Frank implores Karen to do so. The doctor assured them that there is no need to worry about the infant's health. Everything just took longer than planned, and the findings will be available tomorrow. That night, they discussed their options at length. Everything would be exposed the next day. It was hard for them to wait so long. However, this was a necessary evil. They had awakened and immediately waited by the phone. Potentially, the doctor may call at any time. They attempted to dial the doctor's office, but he or she was preoccupied at the time. The phone rang, and I answered it. They're picking up, and the atmosphere is becoming tense. Dr. Karen is placed on speakerphone. He then goes on to describe their efforts and to announce that they have found a solution that they would want to present to them in person. Frank and Karen hastily got into the automobile. Karen feels nervous the whole trip to the emergency room. She seems to avoid Frank entirely. She is completely unprepared, but she worries that the doctor will give her an answer she doesn't like. They arrived after what seemed like an extremely long trip. Once inside, the doctor instructs them to take a seat. The nurse brings in the triplets, and he gives them the good news. They have figured out why the infants are so little too. Karen is on the verge of screams now. Karen's uterus was too cramped for the baby's development. The doctor assures us that the kids' conditions will improve gradually, and that they will grow into healthy, typical-sized youngsters. Both Karen and Frank breathe a sigh of relief. Even the DNA was broken down for the audience. A match may have been found if they had just taken Karen's DNA in the first place.